Hello everybody and welcome to what is going to be my honest review of my first season in draft. Main purpose of this video is for me to take an honest look at how I think this first season went, look at where I think I went wrong, where things went right, and how I can improve going forward. I'm not going to go over specific matches. One, that would make for a really long ass video, and honestly most of the mistakes I made, most of the things I did well, can be put under very similar umbrella terms. So I'm going to break the video down into 4 sections. The season overall, what my expectations were, whether I met, didn't meet, that sort of thing. The draft, what I did right, what I did wrong, what my learnings were from the season, and how I can put them into next season's draft. The actual battles, what I need to work on, what I'm doing well. And I'm also going to go over content creation side of things, because that has been a really big part of this for me. And again, what I think went well, what I need to do better. And honestly, if there's anything anyone thinks I did well or you didn't like about any of the videos, just drop a comment. I do check comments most days, so if you want to see something done a little bit differently, or you want to see more of something that you really like, just drop a comment. So let's start with the season and how it went versus my pre-season expectations. Now, given my lack of experience in VGC and absolutely non-existent experience in draft, getting 2 wins in my first season should feel really good, right? Wrong. I came into this pretty confident in my skills as a battler and a team builder, and needless to say, I got humbled pretty damn quickly. So before the season, I set myself a goal of going 4-4, and then the lofty goal of making the playoffs. I didn't care if making the playoffs was 8th place or 2nd, 1st place. I just wanted to push myself to the playoffs. It turned out that 4-4 was kind of the lofty goal, and for most of the season, 3 wins might have been enough to make the playoffs. But on paper, the first half of the season was a lot easier, other than my week 1 opponent. But hey, getting what I thought was the hardest match out of the way first was pretty good for me. And the season being loaded up like this did kind of work in my favour, since I was needing to find my feet, get myself into a routine for the prep and battles and all that sort of thing. There's always going to be teething problems in getting your routine going and getting into the flow of it. So having the quote unquote easier matchups first meant that I should head into the second half of the season at least at 500, and then in the second half of that season I'd have my shit together and be better prepared for what on paper were the harder matchups later on. This was the theory, at least. The reality, however, there's no easy matchups in this league. And sure, I went 2-2 how I wanted it to go. I probably got hacks out of going 3-1, but every single one of those matchups was tough. It's tough to prep for, it was tough to play, and because of time zones and things like that, it was actually tough to arrange in some cases. You've really got to work your ass off if you want to be successful in draft. And pre-season me was an absolute ass that got put in his place pretty fucking fast. And I'm actually really glad it went down like that, because this has been probably the most fun I've had in any kind of online gaming in a bloody long time. And I think if things had kind of gone the way I thought they would pre-season, bear in mind, pre-season, I didn't know how good any of the managers were. I didn't really have any idea what draft was about. So all of my pre-season expectations and everything were basically based on looking at the squad that I drafted and how I play the game, what I felt like my skill level was at versus all of the other teams on paper. Me saying those first 3 out of those first 4 games were the easier games wasn't based on what I thought of Boy, Jamie on, Kim, all those guys as managers, because at that point I didn't know what they were like. I barely even spoken to them even in Discord. That all came as the season progressed. But yeah, it turned out that A, I was not as good as I thought I was, and B, my team, my squad was a hell of a lot worse than I thought it was, because draft is a lot more different to standard VGC than I thought it was. It being harder, it being more of a challenge, turned out to be so much fun. Me being me, having ADHD, I prefer things that are difficult but achievable. So Draft League being this much of a challenge, but still having those aspects of VGC that I really enjoy, the team building, the having to strategize on the fly, it made it so much more fun to me than if I'd gotten in and it turned out, yeah, I'm pretty damn good at this game. I'm gonna go 7-1 and dump everyone, which I didn't think was gonna happen. I really did think I was probably gonna go 3-5, 4-4, maybe scrape into the playoffs. I'm not that much of an egotistical prick. Yeah, I did not see the amount of fun I've had this season coming at all, and it's been amazing. So for that, Otter, I thank you so much for accepting me into this. This has been brilliant. Now, with the warm and fuzzy part out of the way, let's get into the section of the video you've all been waiting for, the part where I rip myself a new one for being shit. We have to start with the draft, because that's where the season starts. And things started to go downhill from here, to be honest with you. I drafted a pretty good core with Tornadus, Excalibur, Bomber Snow, and Jumper. My teams for the in-game ladder had been using Murkrow Jumpler. As soon as Regulation D had been announced, I'd been looking at Tornadus and playing around with a few teams on Showdown using Tornadus in Murkrow's place for that Sun Wind deck. I knew pretty well. So Tornadus Jumpler was a really solid, familiar pick. From there, I was planning on grabbing Chomp, Murkrow, Goldengo was kind of the core I'd used a lot in Reg C. So being able to grab Tailwind Setter, Redirection, plus the attacker, the damage dealer that I was pretty confident in using would have been absolutely incredible. But it didn't quite work out. So I grabbed Excalibur. It's one of my favourite mons design-wise. It's one of my favourite mons to use, even though I don't get to use it a lot. But it had a lot of the same tools as Garchomp, just with a different typing. Gardevoir was another mon that I'd used quite a bit in the past. I'd used that Telepathy Gardevoir next to Garchomp quite a bit, so I was fairly comfortable in what Gardevoir could bring to the team, even without Garchomp. I didn't see how good it was going to be coming, but we'll get to there. And I did the right thing in grabbing Mabostiff, and Toxicroak. They're two good defensive tools in Intimidate and in Fake Out. Where it kind of went a bit wrong was mostly the Dozo Tatsu picks, but also Mesprit Braviary. And that's also where my inexperience in draft showed. In normal VGC, where everyone has access to all of the mons, Dozo Tatsu is a really, really strong combination, because there's only so many things you can build your team to counter. You've got 6 mons to try and set up to beat absolutely everything. In draft, where you know exactly what you'll be facing every week, Dozo Tatsu is a lot harder to use. With my kind of limited experience in VGC and 0 experience in draft, there was no way I was going to be able to make that work. I wanted to give it a go because it is a fun combination that I've always wanted to try and I've never been able to use. I've always talked myself out of it in the past. And part of me is actually quite proud of myself for wanting to give it a go. But when I failed for week 1 and I ended up looking at the matchups for the rest of the season, I couldn't see a way of making it work. So I lost 2 of my 4 trades immediately by realizing my mistake and trading them away. And that really limited my options later on in the season. Braviary and Mesprit, I should have taken one or the other. Having 3 psychic types, you have to put God of War into that as well. It was really amplifying weaknesses, especially when you take into account Braviary's secondary flying type, which was adding to weaknesses that Torn already brought. It made prep and game planning a lot more difficult than it needed to be. Yes, I'd told myself in the draft process and when I was theory crafting that I was only ever going to bring one or the other. I drafted them to do very different things. It made it very difficult. Those last 4 picks really should have been used to cover weaknesses in the squad. Bring in that I didn't have, or mons that would fill gaps, very obvious gaps that I didn't see. And Mesprit worked out really well in week 1, but then I didn't bring it again for the rest of the season, and just terrible value out of a B tier pick. Braviary as a C tier mon coming to 2 out of the 8 matches isn't too bad. What I didn't quite think through when I was drafting it was that it was going to play a similar role to God of War, so I was going to have to choose most weeks whether to bring Braviary or God of War. And sure, I couldn't see how key a piece or how versatile God of War was going to be during that draft. 2 out of 8 matches for a C tier mon, it's pretty good, but you compare it to God of War, who has been absolutely amazing pickup for me, also out of the C tier. I could have got better value, I think. I also think I could have made better use of Braviary as well. Braviary is a good offensive mon, and having that sheer force ability gives it crazy power, but it doesn't have the best coverage and it doesn't have a great speed tier. So to take Braviary and to take Mesprit, who's got decent coverage but shares the same typing, it's just stupid. And then with the trades later on, to add Houndoom, who's a good defensive disruption mon and is a Dark and Fire type, to a squad that contains Mabustiff, who's also a good defensive disruption mon, pure Dark type, and Urshifu, who's an amazing offensive piece, who's Dark and fighting. It was, again, a pretty stupid decision. I loaded my team up with pretty obvious weaknesses that could be exploited. I had a lot of the right roles, a lot of the right pieces but they were the wrong types. I honestly think that impacted my ability every week, and it made prep for some of the matches ridiculously hard. I can't help but look back now and wonder what would have happened if I'd started the season with Bernardus, Bax, Bomber Snow, Jump Bluff, Gardevoir, Octoprobe, Urshifu, Houndoom, Bramblegast, and Luxray. So the reason I put Luxray in there is because I had a little side list of good picks from BC, and there was a couple of D tier mons on there as well. Houndoom, Luxray, Bramblegast, Braviary, Mesprit, Mabostiff, and Gengar were all on that list. There was a few others, but I don't want to reveal a lot of plans and tech because I might use some of it going into season 2. I, for whatever reason, obviously didn't look at the typings of the mons those rounds. I think that leads quite nicely into the first part of battles. Bad prep or lack of prep was a running theme throughout the season. Give myself a little bit of a break because life got in the way for half of the season, but that was still 4 weeks that I completely failed in my prep. When it came down to the prep, I went in with the plan or the idea of, if I'm playing on Saturday or Sunday, I'll spend an hour or so on Tuesday coming up with a general idea or game plan for the week. Just sort of look at the opposition, make a few notes of maybe weak links in the team where I think my squad matches up really well with their squad. Just pen and a pad, write a few things down, force myself to not start team building right there and then. Just go, right, what can I do with my squad into that squad? What can that squad do into my squad? Then just kind of let that sit, come back in the next day, read over my notes, put it into the team builder. Just start fleshing those ideas out, maybe with specific Pokemon, specific skills or abilities that I'm going to need to make that happen. And then go from there into checking it over, talking it out. Does it work? Does it not work? And then take the team on the Friday into general showdown ladder. Play a bunch of games. Don't worry about wins, losses. Just see how it plays, see how it feels. And that did happen, kind of 3 weeks of the season. The week 2, I thought the prep went really, really well. It went almost exactly like that. And then week 7 and 8. I think week 2 was probably the only one that I went actually to plan. There were 2 pretty huge mistakes I made in prep. Actually, in the first 5 weeks, week 6 onwards, I sort of corrected myself, but not entirely. Those were 1, approaching it like standard VGC, and 2, not accounting for the tech. Start with point 1. In standard VGC, you've only got a team of 6 mons that you have to use to counter the main meta threats. In Reg D, for example, where possible, you're going to EV train your mons to deliver Specs Flutter Mane Dazzling Gleam or a Mystic Water Urshifu Surging Strikes, because they're on almost every team and you don't necessarily know the other mons that they need to be paired with. So you aim for the top usage mons. You try and account for as many of those as possible. In draft, there's only that limited pool of Pokemon you have to account for, so you have the ability to really hone in on your strategy for specific situations, very specific matchups. Throughout the season, I was using far too many generalized EV spreads, trying to, for example, make Baxcalibur live absolutely everything, which then limited its damage, it limited its speed, it forced me down paths I didn't need to go down, whereas I should have been making Bax effective in only 2 or 3 situations and having other mons deal with the rest. Point 2 is really showcased in weeks 1, 7 and 8. Week 1 was Sapsipa, Perisong, Azumarill. Week 7 was that super bulky Snarl Spiritomb. Then week 8 was Terra Fairy, Calm Mind, Typhlosion under Trick Room. Okay, the Typhlosion I'm not sure anyone would have seen coming, but the other 2 were very real possibilities. And in both of those matches, I focused too hard on dealing with the major threats on the squad that I didn't look deep enough into the kits of other mons to see what they could do. Now, of course, everyone's going to look at a Pokemon slightly differently, but having a plan for dealing with, say, Sapsipa Azu, actually looking up what Spiritomb does, it's kind of a must in prep. I also didn't really look at my mons in that way either, so because, and this goes back to point 1, because I was trying to play it as almost standard VGC, I didn't look at what tech I could bring. I didn't look deeper into the kit on a lot of my mons to be able to say, right, if I go, like there was 1 week that I brought acrobatics, physical Tornadus, and did I really need to have Prankster on that Tornadus set? Could I have maybe in other weeks taken that idea and gone with a Defiant Torn versus a team that had Intimidate? It was a possibility, but because I was locked into that standard VGC way of thinking, I didn't account for the tech possibilities on my own squad. In the actual matches, there's a few things that I definitely need to work on. A lot of it comes down to experience. I think a lot of times my lack of experience as a VGC player kind of showed. The most important one, I think, was the decision making, specifically the speed to make decisions. I tend to either be too quick or too slow. There's no middle ground. When things are going well, I seem to make the decisions too quickly, which in a few games caused me to make mistakes and let my opponent back into the game, and in a couple of matches caused me to even lose because I'm making the decisions really quickly. I'm only looking at what's in front of me. I'm not thinking, right, what if they switch that Mon out? Do I need to think about what other moves that Mon has? So just pausing for a second and going, right, I know I need to Thunderbolt that Azumarill, but what's going to happen if that Azumarill switches out to Thizzle? That Thizzle's going to eat the Thunderbolt a little bit better than the Azumarill, and then the Azumarill could come back in later. Just being able to pause in the heat of the moment and think a couple of steps ahead of where I'm at instead of just focusing on the here and now, it would have helped me in quite a few of my matches. On the flip side of that, when something unexpected happens or things aren't going so well, I tend to take way too much time and overthink my decisions, which in 2 or 3 matches cause me to time out, or I end up making a snap decision with like 3 seconds left on the timer, which leads to mistakes and bad plays. So something I need to work on is the time I'm taking each turn. In reality, it's longer than I think, but also shorter than I think, if that makes sense. It's just balancing out the time I'm taking every turn so that I'm giving myself time to think without overthinking. One of the other things I struggled with all season was the positional play with the teams I built. Some was forced on me because of the bad draft I had. So the makeup of the squad meant that I wasn't able to make some positional plays that I would have done if I drafted better. Some of it was lack of experience, not knowing the mons that I'm facing and what they can do. So I wasn't able to see plays, wasn't able to think those couple of steps ahead, like I mentioned in the previous point. As the season went on, I did get better and better, and it's definitely something that will improve as I play more and see a lot of these underutilized mons a bit more. So I kind of looped back into the decision making and the time I'm taking over decisions, but also comes under the inexperience umbrella, and it's definitely something I need to be aware of in myself. And I am quite hard on myself for a lot of these things, and I have to remember that I've only really been playing Pokemon properly since March, and VGC since I think May. So in, what is it, like 5 months, I've learned a lot, and in terms of ability, I'm pretty fucking proud of where I am. There's only so much I can learn from watching YouTube and watching other players play. I don't play VGC every single day, so to have made it to the ability level I am, most people would be really happy with. But me being me, I'm very self-critical. I am always a lot harder on myself than anyone else would be, and that's another thing that I need to work on, is being more positive with myself. You know, in a lot of the weekly videos, I'm good at picking out positives for other people's play. I need to do that for myself as well. And speaking of videos, content creation. Let's talk content creation. Now, I've had so much positive feedback about the videos, especially the weekly roundup RDL show. And I've really loved making them. It's been so much fun. And the only real negative I've got to say about it is just how long it takes to make some of them. And I've been pretty bad at finding the balance between making the videos for the previous week and prepping for that week. Next season, a lot of that will be mitigated because I will have resources for the start of season 2 that I didn't have at the start of season 1. You know, silly things like pictures of each of the Pokemon, battle music that I actually like and want to use, a couple of transitions that I've figured out how to do, a layout for the results screens, and things like that earlier on in the season were taking quite a bit of time to do. Later on in the season were a hell of a lot easier to put together, and I think that's also a bit of a correlation between how much quicker I was able to put the videos together and how much better my prep went for the matches. And that is completely on me. It was because I was having so much fun making the videos that I kind of hyper focused in on that and didn't want to do the less exciting prep work for my battles. One of the things that I do need to get a lot better at is snapshotting the league document every week so that I can have screenshots of the league table. I was forgetting to do that every week, so I was having to go back through all of the results and rebuild the league table every week to be able to put it into the video. Dumbass. On the positive side of things, I have got to the point where I'm a lot more comfortable with the commentary And after the positive feedback on the commentary for the playoffs match round 1, it's definitely something I'm going to look to putting into the weekly videos. How it's going to work in terms of doing commentary for every match, I don't really know, because that'll make for a really, really long video, but I'll have to figure it out to where there's the full commentary for multiple matches in there. That also, in theory, makes the editing process a bit quicker. The other thing that was pointed out was the pacing of the last few videos was apparently a lot better. So, not entirely sure what helped with that. I've looked over the script that I wrote, and it didn't really jump out at me from that. So, I'm gonna have to go back and watch a few of the videos and compare, see what made the way that one was presented better than the way some of the other videos were presented. Between the seasons, I am going to have a look at and work on a few different presentation ideas. So things like transitions to make videos smoother. So like, instead of jumping straight from talking about a squad, a team, you got a little transition in there to help smooth out the drop into the battle, and little animations put in here and there just to make things feel a bit more personal, which I also think will help with the pacing. I'm really happy with where things are in terms of the content creation. It's something I'm really, really enjoying, and I do have a few ideas to take this to the next level in season 2. I've also got a few ideas of things I want to do around the league between seasons as well, just so I can keep the draft league content going on the channel. And I'm honestly really, really excited. In summary, it's been a season of unexpected. Results wise, it wasn't as successful as pre-season overconfident me thought, but overall it was an unbelievable success. I've learned so much, not only about Pokemon and about VGC, but also about content creation, planning, organizing, about my own limits in terms of how much I can do before I burn myself out. And the community around this league is so cool. Everyone, it's just really good people. The battles were tough but fun. It forced me to look at the game I'd been enjoying for months in a completely different way. And I really do think that draft is now my favorite way to play Pokemon. And on top of that, I've thoroughly enjoyed making this content, which you all seem to be enjoying as well. So with that, I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to stop talking myself into a loop, and I will see you all in the next one.